Greetings from Ann Arbor, Michigan, a great state and a great place of the great USA. Welcome to our podcast series, and I am promising you that this series is going to be very enlightening, very inspirational, a lot of fun, and something that will really, I think, help you as you walk your path to holiness. This series is going to have a lot of different things that you probably have questions about, but maybe have the opportunity to ask, especially about religious life. Like, what do they do all day? Who are they? Where do they come from? What's it like when a young woman enters religious life? So stay tuned as we will discuss where sisters come from today. Welcome to our Lumen Ecclesia podcast, Lumen Ecclesia Digital, or LE Digital, as we like to say. And we wanted to welcome you today. Today we have two very special guests, two very dear friends of mine and of our entire community, as you can probably already tell. And Sister Amata Veritas Ellenbecker and Sister Mary David Klosik. And these two sisters have been involved in formation much of their religious life. And so I thought that they would be perfect because I know some of you girls out there are wondering if you have a religious vocation, and you might have heard the term postulancy. And the postulants are basically the young women when they first enter. So for 1 year, we're talking about a very important year in their formation. And so with Sister Mary David and Sister Amata Veritas here with us today, we want to discuss this very important year. And I'm going to begin by saying, sisters, why is this year so important?
Well, I think it's important for a lot of reasons. The first reason that I'll talk about is you finally made the decision to enter. So making that decision to enter is so important. You've spent a lot of time discerning. You've talked to your family. Now you've left what's familiar to you. And now you're finally starting to actually live the life, live the religious life. So when you enter as a postulant, you've spent this whole time discerning, and you continue to discern as a postulant, but now you're kind of in the reality of the everyday, living the life of religious life, living the schedule, praying with the sisters, recreating with the sisters, learning with the sisters. And so now this life becomes your own, and it's not just what you have thought about it to be. It really becomes a reality. So that's an important part of the beginning of discernment.
Now, Sister Mary David, from your own postulancy or from your formation work with many young women who are entering our community, thanks be to God, what would you say would be one of the most common difficulties for young women? What would they find more, and Sister Amata Veritas, you can answer that too. What would be something that they would say, this is just so different and this seems foreign and I really have to adapt to this if this is God's plan and the graces I have for this life?
Yes, that's a great question. I think the answer kind of depends on the person, and also in particular the age at which a person enters, because their lived experience is going to color what the transition for them looks like. So like for me, I was 25, so I had worked and gone to college and been out of school a few years. And so when I entered, it was coming from being a single woman in the world and having control of my schedule. And
what were you doing with your time before you entered?
Prior to entering, actually, I was pretty busy. I was a teacher, and I also worked at a pregnancy help center in Milwaukee.
Beautiful.
So it was
Beautiful.
It was a pretty full schedule, but it was my schedule. And I decided, when I went places and when I would go to adoration and when I would stay up a little later and do what I wanted to do. And but when you enter, all of a sudden, the time is not your own, but it belongs to the Lord in a way that you might not expect, because most of the day is scheduled, and most of the day is scheduled with one another. Mm-hmm. And so I think also,
that's true too.
I think that no matter what age I think you enter, I think the aspect of community life is an adjustment. If you come from a good family, there'll be many similarities, but there'll also be differences, because we all have different backgrounds, whereas in your family, you have the same family background, family culture, family humor, and all those things when you're living with people from all over the country or
Different ages.
There's a lot of give and take that you learn. And you also, in that, learn a lot about yourself. And that you can, by living with these women, acquire a much kind of greater, bigger picture of the world, of holiness, how God works in different people. Whereas before it might have been good, but it was just small.
That's beautiful.
Or very specific to you. I think other challenges that I've seen is for the younger, I entered a little bit older, at a similar age sister Mary David, but for the younger sisters, and even myself, as I really struggled with missing my family.
Yes.
And I was surprised to be homesick because I had lived away from home for so long. But there is a separation from your family that takes place, and a separation from your friends that takes place, and you're living in an unfamiliar area. And so as you go through that first year, you're acclimating to the traditions and the beauty of the community family. But then you can go through a challenging time of also missing your family. And lots of times those times would pop up on me, and I wouldn't be necessarily expecting them. But I really found that was a beautiful part of the call as well, because you realize the good thing that you're giving up for the Lord, that your family is this good, and that is part of the time with them is somewhat part of the sacrifice.
That's beautiful, Sister. I want to thank you both for bringing up both of those aspects. One thing I want to say, if you saw a previous podcast, and I did refer to, quote, giving up your family, and the fact that we never really do give up our families, but that parents many times think they're going to have to give us up, or we do go through, as Sister was mentioning, withdrawal from family because you don't have a cell phone that you can just call them whenever you wish, or you don't have an ability to go visit whenever you wish. And yet the graces are there, and I think that's so remarkable. Sister, I want to ask you, following on that, how did the parents respond, or how do the families respond when the postulants come and enter?
Yes, there's a variety of ways that families respond to their daughter's vocation, but I think universally we can say that as you live religious life, the family comes to a deeper understanding of what this is as they experience your vocation in the midst of their family now. So I think most families, it starts to be integrated into the family in lots of different ways. And I think one way that I've seen that's very beautiful is the sisters' families become part of our greater family. And so they gain this whole community of daughters in a way that's different than their biological daughter. And yet they see how much their daughter is loved.
That's beautiful.
They see how their daughter becomes more of who she is in the convent. And most families want their daughter to be happy. So if they see their daughter happy in her vocation, religious life, ultimately then I think then they start seeing our religious life as part of their family life. But that happiness is kind of the key, because that's what parents want for their family, or their daughters.
So they just gain more daughters.
A lot of them.
Beautiful.
Of all different ages.
A lot of
personalities.
Them. That's true. That's a wide variety
of daughters.
That they didn't exactly have to raise.
Yes,
so, I mean, God is
exactly. Exactly.
The payoff does come.
Yeah.
Sister Mary David, we had discussed earlier on in another podcast also that the postulants, as well the novices, but again, in their very beginnings of walking religious life, that they do have a lot of studies that are very particular to that year. Could you explain to our viewers some of those studies and why the community gives those studies to them?
Sure. And maybe Sister can chime in if I forget something, because she taught so many of those classes. But I think there's kind of two basic, you might say, areas. One is the area of Catholic doctrine, and also of community life and just kind of basic religious formation prior to getting into a more intensive study that would come later on of the vows. So we would study the catechism in depth, in great detail. And at the end of the year, the postulants are even tested on their knowledge of the faith, which especially for all sisters, but in a special way for Dominicans, is very important going forward because they're going to be teaching the faith. So
Does the audience notice a theme here? Wonderful, Sister Veritas, truth. The truth will set us free. Okay,
right.
beautiful.
And then secondarily, being introduced to community life and the Dominican spirit. So we have, lots of times like a Dominican history class or reading of the Dominican saints. And, I know when I entered, all I knew about St. Dominic was that he had the name Dominic.
That's pretty much all I knew, too. I didn't who's Dominic? I don't know who he is. There's no garden statues of him.
God's mercy, Sister, God's mercy.
I know.
So true.
And so I remember Sister John Dominic's class, or I still have her notes, and, from when I was a postulant, and then just living the life. And so we live the life, but then it's also explained to us, like why we have particularly this tradition, maybe of like how we pray for the dead each night right before dinner. We have a very particular procession and practice, and it's very special to know that we have that and to have it explained. But first we're doing it, and then it gets explained why.
Right.
So it's the particulars, but in a very organic way. And then also a lot of human things, how to, like I said, you're living with all these different people. How are we going to do this for the rest of our lives?
And social graces and things like that.
How to make your bed.
Good. Sister Amata Veritas, what are some of those things that they have to learn today? Parents, pay attention. If you teach them from before we get them, your daughter will be ahead. So what are some of those things?
It's funny because, again, every family, every sister comes from a particular culture in their family, and also like skills that you've gained through life and things like that. But, some very practical things is the postulants usually start to cook early on.
Yes.
And so they learn how to cook. And a lot of times they learn how to cook very much from each other.
Yes.
So I think cooking, but even, the very simple things that allow you to live in community with other people is you do have to learn your social graces, your manners. And if you didn't already have manners, you kind of have to brush up on them. How to communicate well is very important. Communicating, just learning how to communicate.
That's true.
And learn how to talk and express your ideas and express difficulties if there's difficulties. And then also learn to communicate with a wide variety of people. And that's where a lot of human experience comes from, is learning about people and talking to people outside of your family, in your family. And those different experiences. So, it's just a lot of practical stuff too. Like I know we always did a lesson on making your bed because, we make our rooms look nice, and not everybody learns that. And so just very simple things. But what it also really does is it gives a unified action and vocabulary to being able to live in community, because to live in community, again, we all have different ideas and different backgrounds that we've come from. But that postulant year, I really think it's actually symbolic of the postulant outfit.
I was going to mention the postulant
Which nobody
outfit.
in their right mind would ever want to wear. So that's not why anybody enters.
But you would if you're a postulant, because in a year you may get this beautiful Dominican habit.
But
explain what they wear and why.
Usually. Polyester skirt, polyester blue vest. Who wears vests, and a white Oxford shirt, blue knee highs for any age, 18 to 26, 28, and black tie shoes. And what actually that does, so yes, it does stick out. It's it gets you used to wearing the same thing every day. It gets you used to wearing something the same that identifies you with something. And but what it also does is the great equalizer, because, whether you're 18 and entering or, 25 and entering, you're now wearing the same thing, that there's this kind of unity with what we're wearing. And that also it's symbolic of kind of like that postulant year where you're learning how to be in community and to do things that allow us to live together and actually in charity and greater growth, because ultimately we all want to be saints. And so postulant year kind of does a lot of that.
Beautiful. Now, I remember being a postulant, and I'm going to ask you both for some of your memories of postulant year. But just one thing that came up when you were speaking was another thing about the postulant outfit that I really appreciated was I could put it on quickly.
Oh, yes.
There's no makeup. I know you think we probably do because, our sisters, these two are just so beautiful. But in any case, we really don't wear any makeup. And so you just kind of get into a habit. And as St. Thomas Aquinas, a great Dominican theologian, teaches us that habits make things happen easier because we don't have to sit around and think and figure out. We just at 5 a.m. jump up, and by habit, thank God, because we don't have too much time to think. Anyway, we put them on. And so I can remember as a postulant, this won't probably surprise you both, trying to be the first one in the chapel in the morning, just because I thought, oh my gosh, I've had all this time, and he's waiting for me. And so, so perhaps some of that's a bit on the overzealous or the ridiculous side. However, I think as a postulant, and I know we all would agree with this from watching the postulants, they're a lot of fun to watch, and their own personalities, as the sisters both have said, really do come out, and you get to know the families through these young women way before you even really do meet them and have a chance to sit down and talk in a familial style, which you do when the families come to visit. But I just remember thinking, I'm all in this, and I've got to get down to that chapel, and I've got to, and so for that reason, I really like my postulant outfit, even though I would totally agree in any other form of life, vocation, I would not. But for this one, I'll do it. What are some of your memories, kind of interesting memories from postulant year?
When I think about my postulant year, it's something, it's simple, but it's big at the same time. I remember having the reality of the call to holiness made very clear and very possible by something that happened. I don't even remember the details of it, but I had something went wrong. I think I was in some kind. There was something that another sister did, or something was hurtful, or so I don't even remember what it was. And so I was trying to figure out what to do, but my first interior reaction was poor me, and I as a posh, I had a thought of like if I expected, like if I had talked to my mom about this, she would have said poor me too, she would have been on my side.
Moms, you can't.
Yeah, I know, and so that's what I kind of just sympathy. Anyway, I remember talking to Mother about it, and I don't remember her. I mean, she didn't say poor you. Mm-hmm. But she also was very loving. But she also then pointed out how I could take a step towards holiness by how I chose to respond to the situation. Mm-hmm. And that all of a sudden it just came together that the call to holiness, the challenge of holiness was real and possible. But it wasn't going to happen by me sitting around saying "poor me," but I was so grateful for the higher call than what I would have given myself.
That's a great point of self examination for each one of us, honestly. So thank you for that reminder. Yeah. It's beautiful.
One thing I loved about my own postulant year, and then also working with the postulant for so many years, is that everything is like a surprise. And I mean like a delightful surprise. The first solemnity in the convent. So we live a very liturgical life, and our life is centered around the liturgy. And the first solemnity in the convent is the All Saints Day, and it follows Halloween. And so usually, the postulants are rushing to cook and do things, and then you walk into this chapel, and it's gorgeous. You haven't seen it like this yet. There's flowers everywhere, and there's much more decoration and statues. And then the liturgy starts, and there's the organ tones. And so we have a much more rich liturgical life on a solemnity. And so each of those, so then that's All Saints Day. But then you wonder about, well, what's going to happen for Christmas? And you really live Advent. And before you enter the secular world, Advent, really Christmas starts December 1st or earlier, right after Thanksgiving. And liturgically, that's Advent. And in the convent, you really experience Advent. And I remember just being so taken aback and really dove into it, being able to really, because I had lived in the working world. I had taught for 3 years before I entered. So I knew that this was my time to really embrace living this liturgical life and really living being formed before I was sent into the apostolate as a teacher. So I just, loved Christmas and, each of the Lent,
So they're all
Easter,
surprises,
all of them.
aren't
And they're
they?
all
I know,
surprises.
that's
And then there's all
true.
the little surprises that happen just within community that are community traditions.
Yes.
That everybody, it's not like we keep them a secret, but that we want to unfold them for the postulants. And
Beautiful.
and I think that partaking in all of the traditions of the family, of the community as a family, is also a great surprise, and I just loved about postulant year. And then also every year after that, seeing the postulants enjoy each of those moments again and again. So
That's beautiful, sisters. One thing that we have certainly been saying, the joy of the religious vocation, the joy of total abandonment to divine providence, and the trust that takes. And that really is something that the young woman has to lead, has to learn. And so you will see from this podcast how the sisters in formation are able to lead these young women into deeper virtues. And I just was thinking as you both were talking I just had this vivid memory, and I didn't come in here with this memory, but it just came to me. So, because I remember the first week I had to wash dishes. I mean, I was the main dishwasher. We all probably remember that week, and thinking, don't break anything and all this stuff. And so after I had finished washing the dishes, and every other sisters were drying them, and they were put up and all this other kind of stuff. So I ran back to the novitiate for novitiate recreation in the evening. This was after dinner, and I just had a heart attack during recreation when I realized, oh my gosh, I don't have my watch. Oh. Where did I put my watch? Well, I never take my watch off. Oh my gosh, I left it down there on the sink. Somebody could take my watch. And I just got panicky when I finally realized, I don't think anybody around here could steal my watch. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm living in such a beautiful place. God bless all these sisters. I could trust them. It's just so many. You're just not so used to being able to trust to that level.
That's true, too.
Very true.
Sisters, I really want to thank you not only for being on our podcast, but for everything that you have given and continue to give to our community. And it is truly a very beautiful life. And we love the postulants very, very specially, as has been brought out, the element of surprise, the joy, the freshness that they bring, the silly mistakes that they're just full of. And we sit back, the old timers that understand all these things, and laugh hysterically. So they bring a real element of really renewed freshness, and God, in His great mercy and goodness to us, continues to bless us with many, many vocations. So we hope that you've enjoyed this. Thank you, Sister May David. Thank you, Sister Amata Veritas. You are just delightful. And tune in again for the next podcast. God bless you. Thank you. So if you like the material on this particular podcast, then please click on the next podcast for another fascinating story.